Good afternoon and welcome to CAD-1's Sheet Set Manager in AutoCAD 2013 webinar. My name is Stan Henney. I'm the Business Development Manager here at CAD-1, and more importantly I have Michael Calkins, who is a registered architect and also one of our instructors and technical specialists on AutoCAD and Revit. So Michael will be conducting the session today, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. Let's see, why don't we, before we start, let's go ahead and, looks like everything's working. If you all could raise your little hand button there to see if you can hear us, that's always a good place to start. Hands are going up, so that's a good sign. Thank you. And just a little housekeeping here before we get started. The control panel here, most of you are familiar with GoToMeeting anymore, but if you do want to switch between the telephone or mic and speakers, you have that button, radio buttons there. You can minimize the console. It's a little orange arrow now, but that's, you can push that over out of the way. The raise your hand button you've already found. And most importantly, if you do have questions, type them into the question box and we will try to answer them as close to in context as possible. So let's see, we've got a few upcoming events, I think, that we want to make you aware of that before we get started in earnest. So we've got a webinar on November 8th from 10 to 11 a.m. with Brian Haley, our civil engineering PE, called Civil Chat. It's a chance to just ask kind of free-form open questions about Civil 3D software and hopefully get your questions answered. On November 20th, Michael and I will be back with you for AutoCAD Answers, along with Jennifer Hoskins will probably join us that day. That's always a fun time to just throw out AutoCAD questions, and Michael and Jennifer will come up with the answers, and I'll come up with pithy remarks.
Just as a FYI on that one, we have changed the date on that November 20th. It is now November 20th. Previously, I think it was November 16th or something like that. So if you've got one of our flyers and you schedule it on your calendar from one of our newsletters, then we've had to change that for a scheduling conflict. So make note of that.
There you go. And let's see, Michael will be conducting the linking Excel spreadsheets to AutoCAD on December 6th from 1:30 to 2:30, and that ought to be interesting. We get a lot of questions about how to do that. CAD-1 will be one of the booth sponsors and presenters up at the AIA Colorado Design Conference in Keystone on November 2nd and 3rd. If you would like to go to that conference, check in with AIA Colorado. The registration is on their website and so forth. And then our entire tech team, or most of our tech team, will be out at Autodesk University on November 27th through the 29th. I know Michael will be out there, and I think Haley's the only one presenting from our group right now.
Brian Haley. So those of you from the Civil 3D side, if you're attending, be sure to look up Brian Haley. He's actually doing a presentation on infrastructure modeler.
But CAD-1 will have a booth out there this year, and we will be presenting some new software add-ons for some of the Autodesk stuff, and Michael from time to time will be at the booth, so if you'd like to stop by and say hi and you're out in Las Vegas anyway, please do so. And so with that, do we have any other housekeeping slides, Michael, today?
I think that's it for now.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Michael and we'll get started.
Hello everybody. Welcome to the Sheet Set Manager presentation webinar. We're going to be talking about something called the Sheet Set Manager. Let's flip over here. The chief benefit of using the Sheet Set Manager is that you can coordinate your drawings much more easily and keep track of your sheets, as the name would imply, as you are putting a project together. It also streamlines a lot of the process, like outputting your work, sending e-transmittals, things like that. It lets you gather everything up and keep track of it, all in a handy-dandy palette that you can keep open in AutoCAD. For the purposes of this webinar, we're going to give sort of this is really going to be a demo. We're not going to have time in an hour-long session to really get in depth as to how all the features function. I kind of want to just walk through and show you where you can find the various parts that you'll need to be aware of in order to use this. It can seem a little intimidating. I know in the past, if anybody out there works or has worked with AutoCAD architecture, this is going to seem similar to the Project Navigator, I believe it's called in AutoCAD architecture. And it does have similar structure, but it doesn't require quite the level of interaction that it does in AutoCAD architecture. We're really just going to gather up sheets, make them available, easily accessed, and then coordinate some stuff among those sheets. So the sheet set manager is controlled from a palette, and we can access that a couple ways. If you like the ribbon, we're going to go to the View tab and click on Sheet Set Manager here. If you prefer to type things on the command line, you just have to type SSM. And in either case, you get this palette popping open. It's going to be blank first time you do this, and you can actually access the Sheet Set Manager from what we refer to as the zero screen. So this is one of the few things you can do when you don't even have any files open. That's what this little icon that suddenly appears in your quick access toolbar is for. If you click on that, it will pop open the same palette. And we have a drop-down list at the top. So what I'm going to do first is walk through the process of opening an existing sheet set. And you click the drop-down, you see there is an open feature there. And we click that, and we're just going to browse to wherever our sheet set is contained. Sheet sets are organized in a little file called a DST. It's the extension. And you can name it whatever you want. The extension will be DST, and this is what's going to keep track of our sheets. It's going to keep track of the views that we eventually place on those sheets. It's going to keep track of the files which are associated with our project. And we just go find that and say open, and it's going to populate our sheet list tab here, and we'll get to these other two tabs in a moment. But we see at the top there is our yoke assembly. That's the name of this project as I named it as I was creating the sheet set. So you can also, you'll see in that drop-down list at the top, this is where we'll access the new sheet set function. And we'll also see in a second we can right-click and close sheet sets. Once we have one open, we can right-click on the name of the sheet set and choose to close that sheet set. Once we have a sheet set open, let's just take a look at how we use an existing sheet set. We have here a sheet list tab, and in that we will have all of our drawings, actually our sheets listed. All that a drawing really is, or a sheet is a layout within a AutoCAD file, a DWG. If we created the sheets using Sheet Set Manager, what we're going to see is that we have a file that really only contains one layout with the name we specify here, and then eventually it'll have an XREF in model space. So we're going back to the single sheet per file with a file XREF'd in, kind of like we used to do in the early days, maybe like R14, and that's the way we approached a lot of that. So if I want to open one of these sheets, I can just double click on it here, and it takes me right to that sheet. I see here is my 1A yoke assembly sheet, and it has a view placed on it. I can double click here on the yoke drawing, and it will open that one automatically for me. You'll also notice that these have been organized under something called subsets. So in this is a manufacturing file, but in the architectural realm, you might have floor plans and like a plans subset, this is called. You might have another subset called exterior elevations, another subset for maybe disciplines, landscape, civil, those kind of things. You get to decide. We can just right-click on the name and add in any subset that you might need for your organization. So what this does is open up a drawing, a sheet, and you'll notice that there is one tab here with, it's got 4 views on it. And just to demonstrate how this works, let me zoom extents real quick. What it does is actually XREF in my working file into model space for me and generate a view, all in a pretty quick drag and drop procedure, which we'll see here in a few minutes. So when you're done, you can just close and save your changes or exit out of any of these files. You don't have to do anything special to finish these up. Once you have created some sheets, you're going to see then on your Sheet Views tab here and we'll get back to creating sheets. I just want to show the structure. The Sheet Views tab here will show each of the sheets in the project which contain a view. So then this is another organizational feature. We can see that my 2A yoke sheet contains 4 views called front, isometric, side, and top. We also have a Model Views tab here, and what we use the Model Views tab for is assigning the drawings, basically our working drawings. We're going to go find a folder. You can click here and say Add New Location, and when you double click on that, you can browse out to your network, and you will just click on the folder which contains all of the files which you want to associate. So your working drawings or your working drawing file, it'll assign those and list them here above and give you access to any named views you had created. So you do need to be familiar with creating a named view in your drawings. We'll do some of that here in a few minutes as well. Once we've created a sheet list, or we're done working in a sheet list, I should say, if we want to exit out of it, we can just right-click here on the Sheet List tab, right-click on the top level here, the name, and say Close Sheet Set. Then it's just actually closing out our access to that DST file. Here in the drop-down at the top, now I can create a new sheet set. However, I can't do that. For some reason, you can't create a new sheet set from the startup screen. You do have to have at least one file open. It can be any file. It doesn't have to be part of this project. It can just be your blank Office template. Once you have that open, now you'll be able to come here and click the drop-down and choose New Sheet Set. And this is going to take you through a wizard. So it gives you a little bit of explanation. We have a couple options here though. We can create a sheet set using an example sheet set. What this lets you do is essentially pick a template sheet set, something that's already been created. This could be one you've created as a template for your office's use. It could be a previous project you worked on that has a very similar hierarchy or structure to the one you're about to create. Doesn't really matter. All it's going to pull through is the subsets and a few other settings. It's not going to pull through any pre-made sheets. You can use the existing drawings option, and that will actually let you gather up any existing drawings you've created that already have layout tabs in them and use at least some of the functionality which is part of the sheet set manager for plotting, e-transmitting, and things like that. You won't get the full functionality by using existing drawings, but you can still benefit from that. We're going to just use the example sheet set for now and click Next. AutoCAD has some templates that install when you install AutoCAD, or some example sheet sets. Those are all listed here. There's a few different disciplines: architectural, civil, and manufacturing. You can also click New, and that's kind of like a blank. It has very, very little information saved into it. You can also select here to browse to a different sheet set. So this is where you would decide if you're going to use a previous project or your office's sheet sets template, I'll call it. We're going to go with the Architectural Imperial. I'll apologize again. I am an architect by training, and I know there's many engineers out there, but
come on, Michael, live on the edge. Do civil.
Let's do civil. We can do civil. Let's do civil. What the heck? Let's see where it takes us. And so when we click on Next again, we get to give this sheet set a name. And we can give it a description if we like. It's not critical. And we have to make some decisions about where that DST file is going to get saved. This would likely be in the drawing directory for the project you're working on. And there's a Properties button here. We're not going to go through everything in here. I just want to show you. When I click Sheet Set Properties, we have the ability here to fill out some critical information. Once we create the sheet, I'm going to show you that the proper template you should use for a title block or a border for your drawings within a sheet set are going to have fields built into them of a very particular type. They're meant to pull information from these fields here, these properties of my sheet set, of my project. So you can go through and fill this out. If you don't feel like doing it when you create the sheet set, don't worry about it. You can go back and edit it later. So you can fill out things like your client name, project address. You can also add in additional custom properties here. Maybe you want to add in addresses for your consultants as well, structural engineer, your civil engineer, your architect, things like that. You can add in custom properties and have those reported automatically into all of the title blocks which are assigned to this sheet set. I'm not going to spend any more time in there. We got to keep moving. So I'll hit Next back here, and we get a final preview. We can go through, and in this case I'm going to get a list of the subsets. We'll see those again here in a minute. And some of the other information. Now, it's good to review it. Take a look carefully at some of these things. If you don't like what you see, just hit the back button, make some changes. If you're okay with it, hit finish. And we'll see it created my CAD-1 sheet set here, and there are my subsets. And I can't expand any of these subsets because I haven't yet added any sheets to my project. So when it comes time to add a sheet, there's a couple options. You can right-click on the name of the sheet set and say New Sheet. And it will just add a sheet to the bottom of the list here. It will be on the same level as your subsets. If you want to add a specific sheet under a specific subset, just right-click on that subset and say New Sheet. And it'll pop open a dialog box and let me pick a number for the sheet and a title. I'm going to make up some civil terms here for my sheets since I went with this a grading plan inside my grading plan subset seems to make sense, I think.
Yeah.
So I hit OK, and I will see here I have now added a sheet to the list. What happened is when I was creating the sheet list, I actually told AutoCAD where to start saving my drawings. This has actually generated a DWG for me. And I can see here that it's actually going into this special folder when I hover on it, inside my webinar folder for this particular webinar. And you can double click on that and it will open that sheet for you. Now how did it know which title block to use? That's something else that I would have assigned as I was creating the new sheet set. You would just select a path to your Office standard sheet set template or your project template, whatever it might be. And when I zoom in, you'll see that if you're familiar with fields, there are quite a few fields already assigned in my title block. One is the sheet number. As I was creating it, this field started to pull from the properties of that sheet. The date is just a standard date field. Probably I think that's the last saved date. And these other things like the values, the ones that report value, are going to pull from the project properties, the custom properties of the project we were looking at earlier. And unfortunately, really for the scope of this, it's almost another hour-long webinar to talk about how to properly build a template. There might be something maybe in the new year. We'll do a separate webinar specifically on that subject. But we're just pulling from one of the AutoCAD defaults here. Actually, this is one of my classroom templates that we're using now. You can also, once you've gone through, this is a nice little feature, one of the benefits. I'm going to go ahead and create a few sheets in here. Let's call this one just C2 and utility plan. One of the nice things that we can do, just as a sort of a side benefit of using your sheet set manager, is that when the time comes, you can actually generate a table of your like an index of the drawings in a particular sheet set automatically. So as you go through and add in sheets to the sheet set, you can just right-click here on the title of the sheet set, choose your Insert Sheet List Table, and it will drop that table directly onto whatever sheet you're currently looking at and let you place it on there. This is going to be controlled by your table style manager, so if you don't like that font, we can, of course, update that. Okay, so we've gone through and we've created a sheet. I right-clicked and created a sheet, but it's blank. I don't have any ability, anything to place on there. What we have to do for our next step is come down here to the Model Views tab on the palette, and it's going to be blank as well if you've just created this sheet set, and there'll be this Add New Location option or listing there, and you just double click on that and then browse to the, whoops, let's try it again, projects, and let's browse to, I'm just grabbing something here, browse to the folder which contains your AutoCAD working files. When you get down into that folder, it'll be empty. It doesn't matter. It'll say it's empty anyway. Don't worry about that. Just hit open, and you'll see then it populates a list of the files contained, the DWGs contained in that folder. and you can expand those out and you will see your named views. And I'll probably finish up by talking about how to create a named view in a drawing. If you don't have a named view in there, you can still use this. Don't worry about that. So once I've added in working files and I'm ready to add drawings to or views to my sheet, it's as simple as dragging and dropping from the palette into the drawing, into model paper space. And when you drag and don't click, just release it inside your drawing, you'll see your view stuck to your crosshairs or to your pointer, and it's going to come in at a, I believe the current scale, I forget exactly which controls, how that's controlled. I believe it's the current annotation scale. But we can decide what scale are we going to place this on the drawing by right-clicking before we click the place. And there's our list of all the scales that this drawing contains. I'll stick with 1 to 100. It looks like a good size. Simply just place the drawing on the sheet. What it does is actually create a viewport in paperspace and simultaneously generate an XREF to the model space working, the model space of the working file that you drug the view from. So this is going to create an XREF automatically. If you actually go to your XREF manager, you'll see that listed right here in the XREFs. A couple words of caution here. The viewport lands on the current layer, and so does the title for that view. So you might need to do some layer management if you don't like your viewports to plot. Some people do, some people do not. So I would select that and put it on your viewports layer if that's your choice. We'll see that it also created a view title automatically based on the name of the view which I created in the working file. And there is a number for the drawing, but it's not filled out yet. I have to do one more step in order to number the drawing. So you can just go back and forth. You go to your sheet list again, open up a different sheet, go back to model views and drag over your other views and just keep placing them each onto the appropriate sheets. And then if you want, you can just close. If it's all set up how you want it, you can close the drawing and it'll save. It'll ask you to save. Once the view is on the sheet, then the next step will be to number it. How do we number that view? Well, now we can go to the Sheet Views tab, and once we have placed a view on a sheet, that sheet will now appear in the Sheet Views and allow us to expand it out. And I can view all of the drawings, all the views which have been placed on that sheet. And in order to manage those, I can now right-click on the view and select the Rename and Renumber option, which opens a dialog box and allows me to specify a number. And if I wanted to, I can now change the name of that view. You could add in other text if you wanted. And when let me do Control-Tab to go back here. I just renamed that. Once you've made a change here in the project, the Sheetset Manager, we'll have to then do a regen, R-E-enter, in order for that information to automatically update here. Or I shouldn't say automatically, in order to force it to update that. So now I have sheet drawing number 1 named Overall Site Plan. So you would just go back and forth. You can continue to add sheets. You can right-click, add more sheets in here. You can, if you want, add multiple folders on the Model Views tab. I could add additional locations. Maybe you've got 4 separate folders that comprise a single project, different disciplines or something like that. You could add each of those in turn here to this list. You can also, if you had some existing drawings which were not initially created by right-clicking in the Sheetset Manager and saying New Sheet, you can still right-click and say Import Layout as a Sheet. And this will allow you to pull in the layout from any drawing you specify. I can browse and go find any given project, any file that has layouts already built into it. And then in this dialog, once I've added it here, I can check the layouts, the layout tabs that are contained there, and bring any of them through by clicking import check. It will add them as sheets. Now, what this is doing is just giving me access to that file, but it's not going to be integrated into the overall structure for sheet views and things like that. So we won't have the ability to label views or whatever it might be. One of the other things, now I talked about coordination. I'm going to do a little pretend stuff here. We're going to pretend that, let's see, I'm on the grading plan. What do I have on my utility plan? That I wanted to label a particular view here on this sheet, like a elevation perhaps, that is now placed over here on my sheet view. I'm going to say that this utility plan, let's just pretend that that is actually my exterior elevation of this building. When you expand that out, I'm on the sheet views tab here. You expand out the sheet and find the view on there. You can right click on the view, and there's this option to place callout block. And you hover there and it says callout. And what this is going to do is create in this case it's been set up to do an elevation callout. There's other, we can assign other blocks as necessary. But we'll see that it is pulling that drawing through, that number through, using a field to show me the sheet number, but I haven't yet numbered this drawing, so let's create that as number 1. And there we go. So now I can actually call out, this is a special dynamic block I can rotate. I can call out drawing number 1 on sheet C2. Whoops, I guess I'm on sheets. I just labeled the same drawing, but sometimes that happens if the two drawings are on the same sheet. So you can actually rename here in the, let's try this one over here, place callout block for this one. There we go. 1 on C1. And if I decide that, you know, that should become drawing number 2, I can rename or renumber as necessary in the Sheet Set Manager. And the next time I view my drawing, the callout referring back to that other sheet and that other view will automatically update. So those of you, if anybody out there is familiar with this sort of functionality within Revit, we've gained some of that that two-way communication here that Revit has in it automatically. Now we can do that through the Sheet Set Manager.
Believe me, that's a wonderful tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those when you stop and think, wow, that one time on that one project, how many RFIs did we get because, you know, we at the last minute moved a detail from sheet 6 to sheet 7 and forgot that that detail was called out on all the other sheets in the entire project, and we didn't change it before we hit print. You know, I mean, it happens. You have to issue all those addenda and things like that. You know, I've been there and gone through that. This is one of those I wish I'd had way back when, you know, working on that one project. All right, so once you've built a sheet set, you've got all your drawings, all your individual sheets created. There's other benefits. We saw that there was a drawing index that we could use. We can access by just right-clicking here. One of the other benefits, or some of the other benefits we have, are also accessed from the Sheet List tab by right-clicking on the sheet name, the sheet list name, and viewing the options here, one of which is Publish. Anybody out there familiar with the Publish tool? Well, we can use that and have it just assign automatically all of the drawings contained in this sheet set. So think about publishing your entire project in just a few clicks. So right-click and we go to Publish, and there's lots of options here for publishing. We can actually go right to Publish to DWF or PDF. We can output it to a physical plotter. My recommendation, just the way I am, I always publish to DWF and check my work. And if I like what I see, then I go ahead and output to a physical plotter. But you can choose these options. You can actually publish using page setup overrides if any of you are using page setups. I hope you are. And there's a few other options in here. We can do some management and setting stuff. But if I choose Publish to DWF, first thing it's going to do is ask me where to save it. And it's going to run through and automatically print all of the drawings. Because I right-clicked and chose to Publish to DWF here at the top level, it's going to publish all the drawings, all the sheets contained in this file. So if I'd had 80 sheets, it would have run through the process and output them. And it takes a little bit of time, so be patient if you decide to use that process, because it is writing an electronic print. We also have the right-click option there to go. We can go to Publish. Some people prefer this, Publish Dialog Box. This is a little more, this gives you the control over what gets published. Again, if you're familiar with the Publish Dialog Box, I think we're actually, I believe it's not on the calendar yet, but we're planning a page setup and publishing webinar for sometime early next year as well. So if you're not familiar with this tool, be sure to attend that webinar because it's a huge time saver. Allows you to output multiple layouts from multiple drawings in one shot without having to open, close, open, close. So this is going to pull in all of our sheets from the project. I can use my plus and minus to add in additional layouts or remove layouts from this list. I'm not going to spend any more time there. I'm going to right-click back here in the Sheet Set Manager to view some of the other options. There is an eTransmit. There's another nice tool that I really would recommend people get familiar with. eTransmit. Oh, got to save everything. There's another option. You can right-click and say Resave All Sheets. So this will actually save all the sheets in your project automatically by right-clicking and saying Resave All Sheets. Now you can say eTransmit. This is basically going to generate a transmittal package for your drawings and any other file type. This will actually accept any file type, so you could attach in Word documents and PDFs. But basically the whole point of this is that it's going to gather up any important information associated with a DWG file, like say a, well, let's see, here's my DST, your plotter configurations. It'll grab your CTBs for color dependent plotting. It would grab in any XREFs, any of the XREFs that it takes to generate your sheets or any of these drawings. It will automatically gather those up. You know, it's always this in my classes. I always do show of hands. How many people have ever sent an email with an AutoCAD file attached, only to get a response from the receiver saying, "Oh, thank you, but what about all the XREFs that are supposed to go along with that?" I've done it, despite the fact I know I'm not to do that, and eTransmit will prevent that from happening.
And Michael, Jan asks, will it gather SDFs or SHP shape files with it?
I would assume so. Anything that's been tied to, I'm not familiar with
Those are
the process in Civil
GIS
3D or GIS files, but I believe it should actually take care of any of those kind of files. Anything that is linked to the project in any way will pull through. So anybody using data extractions, anybody using linked Excel spreadsheets, anybody who's inserted or linked in a PDF, a DWF, a DGN, any of those files that you can attach to a DWG, eTransmit will automatically grab those and put them into a zip folder for you. A couple other, just quickly, some other benefits. You can tell it to save down to previous versions. So if you're sending to a consultant who hasn't yet upgraded to the latest release, you might need to say save it back to 2010 or 2007 file format. It can do that with all the files at once rather than you having to say open save as for every single one you need to send. Some other features you can do, right-click on the name of the sheet setup. There's an archive feature. It's actually very similar to eTransmit. It just doesn't generate an email for you. And let's see, more new subsets. Yeah, there's pretty much covered everything there except the last thing. You can right-click. Down here is properties. So if you did create a sheet set and you didn't take the time to edit things like client name or address or whatever it might be, you can right-click on the sheet set name and go to properties. And in here now you can come in here and edit any of these values. And I've got caps lock on here. And once you've saved those properties, now of course it's a different value in that case. Sometimes it's depending on the particular, let's see if I can get this to work, depending on the template that you use, it might be created to point at different parts of your properties, and I'm not really sure why it's not grabbing my project name and address right now. But you should be able to change it. Let's try the project. We'll try the last one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, for some reason I think I've locked myself out of my sheet set here. So it should actually update using any of those custom properties. These fields will pull from those custom properties. I'm not really sure what's going on here.
No, I'm not either.
Stan, you know what's going on here?
Don't look at me.
Yeah, this is one of those. I use it 20 times, and then of course when I've got the largest audience watching me as I'm doing it is when it decides to fail me. But this is inside of the properties where you will specify things like client name and address. This is also where you can go in and specify things like the template for sheet creation. This is where you'll point the project at a specific you'll point this at a specific template. So your office template, your project template, whatever it might be. Maybe you have a special template just for a given project. You can tell it where it will store the sheets. You can tell it up here where the block is contained that you like to use for your callouts, and several other key features. Label the views, so you can the labels for the views once you place them on a sheet. Those kind of things. Let's try one more here. For some reason my region, there we go.
There we go.
Project number. I was just filling out the wrong field inside of my properties to fill out the project name and address here.
And thank you, Sandra and Michael.
All right, so a couple other things. So now sometimes any of you who have an existing sheet set, you might be looking at it, or existing sheets, you might be looking at it and saying, well, you know, I've got a project, I've got maybe 25, 30 individual drawings or sheets already created on layouts that I would like to be able to use and take some advantage of the sheet set manager. Well, we still can. You can right click, I'm going to right click and close this particular sheet set. And again, I'm going to click on the drop down and say new sheet list. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at the other option here, existing drawings. Click next. Again, you can give it a name and a description, and again a place to save the sheet set. Click next, and then this will be a little different. Instead of choosing a template to start from, what we're doing is actually going to browse. Click the browse button, and we'll just go find the location where we have existing drawings we would like to locate, to organize into a sheet set. And of course, where is it? Class files. For some reason they just give you this tree structure. It doesn't let you have the nice kind of your typical file selection window that AutoCAD has. You do have to go through the whole tree and drill down to the particular project you're looking for. So if any of these drawings have layouts already placed on them, we will see those layouts pop into this list as a sheet. And then you hit next and finish again. And there we go. There was one layout on one of my sheets, and I can double click on it and open that up. So the reason you might do this is that you still want to organize all of your sheets here and take advantage of things like right click and use the publish tool or e-transmit, things like that. And going forward, you can still add additional sheets to this sheet list by right clicking and saying new sheet, Any sheets you add to this project using the Sheetset Manager will have full Sheetset Manager functionality in the coordination of sheet numbers and views on those sheets and things like that. All right. So let's see how we're doing on time, Stan. Got a little time?
Yeah, we've got about 15 minutes.
Yeah, we have time for questions too, so feel free. I know I'm rushing through a lot of this stuff and wanted to allow for any kind of question answer time at the end. Hang on, referring to notes.
Well, and this is something that, you know, Michael, I believe this is covered in our advanced AutoCAD class.
It is.
More in depth if you care to take the class. I'm not trying to give you a sales pitch here, but still. And then we also post these webcasts when we're successful recording them, which we're getting better at, on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. You can go to our website, CAD-1.com, and then the events and then the archives tab. So events, archives, and you will see all of our recorded webinars that you can watch and go back and enjoy again and again with your family and friends. So they're there for you. And let's see, what else? You ready to
let's
pick up there?
One more portion. So we talked about earlier that in order to place a view onto a sheet, you need to have ideally you would have a named view already created in the working drawing. So the quickest way, the easiest way to do this is if you don't yet have, let me open up one of these sheets that we've been using previously, one of these sheet sets. If you have added drawings in here, once they're here in the Model Views tab, you can actually use this to also access those files. So I can double click on my yoke assembly here and open up that actual working AutoCAD file. This is not the sheet that's going to be printed. You can see the tabs here are basically empty. All this is, in this case, is the working file. And what we want to do is create a named view which I can then drag onto one of my sheets later on. The way you would accomplish this from the ribbon anyway is to go to the View tab and then come over here to the View Manager. I know a lot of people out there are familiar working with views, but just in case you haven't used the name Views, we're going to click View Manager. It opens up a dialog box, and I'll see here a heading on the left called Model Views. I do have one view already created in this particular file, but I want to create another view of maybe just one small portion. This is a great feature if you work on very, very large files, physically large or complex. I know some people in the mining industry, some students have had a particular file that was 3 miles on a side. Their project was 9 square miles, and they might work on an area that was 30 or 40 or 300 or 400 square feet at any given time, and they had to do a lot of panning and zooming. This is one of the methods we can use to save on some of that panning and zooming. It also works for these sheet sets. So we're going to click the New button. We have to give this a name, and I'll call this just Castle Nut. Is that how you spell Castle, Stan?
Yeah.
Or is it E-L? I'm terrible at that.
That looks good to me.
Yep.
I'm a terrible speller as well.
I don't have. There's no spell checking in your dialog box here.
Yeah, your DNA.
You can then, once you've named it, you can come here to the boundary, and you have a couple options: current display or define window. You can click on the green square here, and once you do that, it's going to take you back in your drawing. You see you can define a window. This is kind of like using the window option in plotting. And just pick a box around the portion of the drawing that you want to capture, I'll say, as your castle nut, in this case, my castle nut view. And it will add it to the list. And I can finish and say OK. Now that named view will be added here in the drop-down list under the views. When you're working in the drawing, what's nice, let's just pretend this is a really large file and we're looking at something on the other side of town. I can click the drop-down view and select the views drop-down and select Castle Nut. and AutoCAD will zoom me over to that part of my drawing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save the drawing, and we'll see now that my castle, or my YA Assembly 1 drawing on the Model Views tab of the Sheetset Manager now shows the castle nut view listed. So now when I go to another sheet on which I would like to place an additional view, maybe that's not the best one, let's say, here I want to add one more view on here. Using Sheetset Manager, I can go to my Model Views tab, go to that castle nut view, and just drag and drop it onto the sheet. And again, I can right-click, select a scale as necessary, and then click to place it. And there is the view. And basically, the view, the named view you created in the working file, is going to be the shape and the boundary of your viewport when you place it onto the sheet. That's essentially what the named view is controlling. If you decide to drag the entire drawing, basically it's going to bring everything in model space across with your view. That might be acceptable. If you're a really clean drafter and you don't leave any kind of extra stuff floating out in space, that's fine. You can do that. Pull it through and it will pull in a nice clean boundary here around the extents of your model. Just a reminder again, those viewports do go onto the current layer. In this case it was 0, so you might like to grab that and switch it to a viewport layer if you have a non-printing viewport layer.
Well, that's really interesting tool there. That's another nice one that I can see a lot of use.
Yeah, the named views are a big time saver if you're working on very large files. In my realm, even a large file is typically only, a few hundred feet on a side, so I only use this for actually maintaining things in the Sheetset Manager.
I see a few people from the GIS world and so forth out in the audience today, so I can see where castle nut might translate to castle rock.
There we go. Exactly. Yeah, Castle Rock versus Fort Collins if you have a large file spanning the length of I-25 or something. Yeah, so that's named. That's the named views is what we refer to those as, and you can access those from the View tab on the ribbon in the View Manager.
Are there any questions or anything that anyone would, kind of like to see? We got 10 minutes or so, and so if there's some things you've kind of had questions about, or gee, could you show us a little of this? Post your question. Otherwise, are you?
Yeah, I guess
getting close to.
I am. Yep, that's
the end of the day.
I guess one more thing I could show you real quick, that if we go to our, let me give it a second. Let's view. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my spot here. I wanted to pull up and show you the structure for your saving the files that you save. Let me do a little browsing here for just a second. Once we create our sheet set, it is going to get saved into the folder which you specified, and in this case I have, to make sure. So when I created my sheet set, I told it to save my sheets into the webinar Sheetset Manager folder, and so it's just building a structure here, and it's creating those two sheets. I right-clicked and said New Sheet. It added them here to this base folder. Now, ideally, what you would probably do is create a separate folder called Sheets within your project folder, so that you would then save each of the sheets in there, just to keep your working files and your sheet files separate from one another. It's not critical. You could save them all together. You see I've got kind of a messy list here. I've got everything dropped in together. And that might be all right. If you stick with the Sheetset Manager, you don't actually ever have to go into this, for the most part, to access your files. You might be able to, you theoretically could stick with, at least when it comes to managing your drawings in the sheets you're going to print, you could stick with the Sheetset Manager and access everything you need, because you can access the sheets for the project from the Sheet List tab, and you can access the working drawings you added from the Model Views tab. Remember, you can just double click on them and open them directly.
And Michael, James asks, and there were 2 or 3 people who came in a little late, so James might have been one of them, but it's worth repeating to everyone. How do you start this from scratch?
All right, yeah. So let's go that one more time here. I'm gonna close this sheet set I currently have open, and I'm actually gonna close. Let's do it. Just close everything. Close everything I have open, and because I have a tendency to open about 30 files at a time. If you're going to start this from scratch, you do have to have at least a blank file open. Any file. You can have anything you want. Fortunately, if you try to do this from the 0 screen, say new sheet set, it's going to tell you not available with no open documents. Don't know why. I usually just open a blank AutoCAD DWT or create a new file from that. To create the new sheet set, then you're going to click the drop down and choose your new sheet set. Oop, did I not get it? There we go. And you're going to walk through the wizard. And this is ideally you'd use an example sheet set, which is like your office template. And again, we can use one of these that is installed with AutoCAD, or you can browse to a sheet set which you've created previously. So once you've gone through this one time on a project, and you've set up all of those subsets, and you've said, okay, this is my template, this is the call-out block I want to use for my drawings, this is the structure of the custom properties, things like that, you can use that for your next project.
And it doesn't. This is another one of those things that it really doesn't hurt to set up for common use in the company. You know, as kind of a default, so that your standards remain the same for across the board.
Yeah, because oftentimes every project in an office, any project or any office that likes to maintain standards across all their projects. I know a lot of offices leave that up to each project manager to determine the standards applied. But in any case, you can still create one of these sheet sets. And this is an example. You can have these subsets, and it'll automatically generate all of the a subset for your general notes pages, your architectural, all the disciplines. You could add in additional subsets as you see fit for maybe plans. And add in a subset underneath your architectural subset. I can right-click on architectural again and say another new subset, and call it elevations. And all of these things would be saved into that example sheet set which you start your next one from. So you don't have to create these from scratch. And again, other things that will get saved to that example sheet set are here in the properties. Any of these things you see listed as a path. Mine are all going to the C drive. Yours would likely be pointed at your whatever, your M drive for your AutoCAD standards, or whatever it is you use for your templates and content like that, office-wide content. Any of these are probably pointing at those locations, and that would already be saved as well. Instead of having to click on each of these and choose the ellipsis to repath every single one, these would already be set up, ready to go. All right?
And Sean has a quick question. Will all sheet set templates created disappear with each new release of AutoCAD?
They will not. They carry through. So if you upgrade from 12 to 13, you can still open that DST right there in 2013. I can show you here. I actually have.
Sure as the world 2014 will come out and prove us wrong. But
well, yeah.
At least past history, no.
Yeah. What I don't know, I honestly, I guess I apologize. I haven't tested it. It seems like I should test. When I think of it, I always think, wow, I should have tested that. I don't know if you save a DST in 13 that it will open in 12. I would assume no. Just to play safe, I'm going to say it probably will not. Same as a file created, a DWG created in 2013 has to be saved back to 2010 to work in prior versions. I would imagine a DST format, the file format, has also been changed. So I can't swear to that, but
going forward, it should go forward.
Yeah, everything should be forward compatible.
And Sean, it says, but you have to point to a network folder or something, right?
Yeah, as you're setting up your properties, so if I'm going to right-click on the sheet set name and go to properties. you don't. You just need to point to a folder which you have access to for this project. Ideally, it'd be a folder everyone has access to. So that being most likely a network folder. If you're going to be working on the project with others, if you're working in a networked environment, these will probably point at your I don't know, I'm trying to remember what's the common. There's a lot of offices out there use the same drive letter for their CAD standards.
Yeah.
It would probably point to that folder so that it pulls through from a central location. The problem is if you point this at a local drive, even if you all have the exact same folders on your machine, you're going to notice there's going to be a username difference. But it also happens that, the same as other templates, if you make a change to the template on your local machine, your coworkers won't see that change on their local machine if they're using a local template. So ideally, yes, any of these template settings, any of these standards that you're pointing to for the project should be in a single central location which all team members have access to.
Now, I don't know if you know, Michael, and I'm kind of throwing a curve at you here, but if somebody decided to use something like the Autodesk Cloud, storage,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any idea how that might work as a storage device for, in lieu of a network, say, or something like that? And you may not have an answer, so I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Well,
there.
let's check something here. I'm going to import a layout, and let me just see. I haven't tried it. It appears that as you are adding sheets, so if you did have existing drawings that were saved on the cloud which contain layouts, it does give me access to the Autodesk 360, to the cloud computing here, through the select drawing process. So I could give it a shot. We could try logging in, but
we can answer
if you are
it later.
using the cloud, yeah, any of you using the cloud, we could experiment with that. I should note that if you
I just see more and more people collaborating from, say, separate home offices, but they're working, or one guy's doing this part of the project and one guy's doing this part of the project, and more people are interested in, okay, can we put the files on the cloud storage and then all have that access to them? So it's something we can look into for the future, perhaps. In fact, that would be a good webinar, using the cloud storage for the future.
And that does bring up a good point, that if you have a couple points, it's a really great idea, as with any new feature that you like to implement in your drawings, that you have a meeting with your staff, with your team, your project team, and discuss the use of the new feature like Sheetset Manager. Make sure everybody's on board and understands how to use it, because if somebody decides to go start creating individual sheets on their own, not using the Sheetset Manager, you're going to have kind of one-off situations. You're going to have a drawing that doesn't necessarily cooperate with the others and coordinate properly with the other sheets. And you could also have somebody accidentally ruin the structure, and you'll have to rebuild it, that drawing from scratch. You're not going to destroy the whole structure, but
well, anyway, just a good question. We'll see where we are at 2:30. If there's not any other questions, we will thank you for coming once again today. We really appreciate it, and because it gets awfully lonely in here by ourselves. And if nothing else, look for the posting of the webinar in the next few days. Please feel free to call us about any classes or support needs that you might have, or any of the software you may need, and thank you again.
And then we have had, just in case if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please send emails to webinars@cad-1.com, and we'll take those. We love having suggestions. We're always wondering what features are people using. Sometimes we feel like, well, maybe everyone's already aware of some particular feature, but if we get some feedback, people who'd like to know more about a given AutoCAD feature, let us know. And this also applies for Civil 3D and any of the other webinars we provide.
Revit, etc.
So, webinars@cad-1.com. They're on your screen.
Great, folks. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you soon, I hope. Bye-bye.
Bye.